Welcome to Faith for the Apocalypse. My name is Nick, and this channel is a space for us to talk about faith, politics, and whatever else we want, which today is going to be some more history as we continue our series, How the Did We Get Here? In this series, we're lifting up the hood and looking a little more deeply at the ideological movements that have been gaining traction and power in the background over the last 30, 40, 50 years in order to culminate in the perfect storm of our current political, economic, and social chaos. We started this series with a video about white supremacy, where we talked about the movement of white supremacy from the fringes of our society into the center of power itself, where it now dominates our international and domestic policy. We follow that up with a conversation about Christian nationalism, an ideology that is at its heart both anti Christian and anti democratic. And we talked about the dangers of this movement and how it can erode the very values that we hold most dear. This week, we are moving our attention towards the economic sphere as we talk about greed and economic elitism and the crony capitalism or kleptocracy that now dominates our financial reality. You see, we are now in a situation in which those who have more than everyone else combined. The economic elite seem to be robbing us blind, stripping our planet, and leaving nothing left. And I'm left here wondering, as I'm sure you are too, how exactly did we get here? So that's what we're looking at today. But before we get into it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit notifications, turn them on if you want to be notified when I post a new video. This series has been a little intense and a little dark, so we are going to take a pause 3 videos in after today, and next week we are going to have a little bit of a palate cleanser as we look at the Disney Plus TV show Andor, as we explore the quote, "Rebellions are built on hope," and talk about different theories of change and resistance. But first, let's dig into our topic for today. Now, it's no secret that something is going terribly wrong in our economic systems. The vast majority of Americans are struggling to get by on a day to day basis, while a small number of billionaires seem to be dismantling the institutions that we created to care for one another for their own personal benefit. The rich continue to get richer as promises for the economic betterment of all of us continue to go unanswered. We all know that something's wrong, and we all know that it's getting worse. As of 2024, the collective worth of America's top 12 billionaires surpassed $2 trillion. The combined worth of this group of people increased by more than 193% between March 2020 and December 2024. The wealthiest 10% of Americans now control over 73% of the total wealth, and the richest 1% own 50% of the US stock and mutual fund markets. Meanwhile, the bottom 50% of Americans hold only about 2.5% of the country's total wealth. In 2023, CEOs were paid 290 times as much as the typical worker. This is in contrast to 1965, where CEOs were paid only 21 times as much as the typical worker. And we know that this difference in wealth, this difference in economic power, also equates to a difference in political power. In 2024, 100 billionaire families spent a staggering $2.6 billion to influence the election. This is 16.5% of total election spending. We can compare that to the 2020 election, in which billionaire election spending came to only $18 million, or only 0.6% of total political contributions. We have moved away from representative democracy towards a pay to play oligarchy. And we have a long history of ideology that has supported this alarming and terrifying shift. For our history lesson today, we're going to have to go back a little bit further than the culture wars and religious revivals of the 1920s, where we find the origins of contemporary white supremacist and Christian nationalist movements. If we're going to be talking about capitalism, we have to start our conversation with an exploration of the Protestant work ethic. The Protestant work ethic, also known as the Calvinist or Puritan work ethic, is a concept that we find in sociology, economics, and history. This talks about a certain disposition or activities that are shown particularly by Calvinist Protestants who exhibit behaviors of diligence, discipline, and frugality. The term Protestant work ethic was developed by sociologist Max Weber in his 1906 book, The Protestant Work Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. In this book, Weber claims that the ideology of the Protestant work ethic is what enabled the rise and spread of capitalism throughout the West. During the Protestant Reformation of the 16th century, Catholic authority was challenged in a variety of ways. One of these ways is through the democratization of vocation. While Catholic leaders were called to their work by God, individuals who were members of faith were not called. They were a part of the other, the regular, the worldly community with mundane day to day tasks. For Calvinists, we all share a sense of vocation. Even if you aren't called into ministry, God has called you to whatever job you have out in the world. You might not be called to be a preacher. You might be called to be a doctor or a carpenter or a mother. No matter what job you have, it is a calling that God has given to you, and thus you have a responsibility to do that job to the very best of your ability. Because after all, you're just doing what God has created you to do. The Protestant work ethic tells us that we should work hard and we will be blessed and rewarded for working hard. The Protestant work ethic also is not working in order to control others or to amass wealth. Theoretically, it is working so that we can better serve our God and thus eventually better serve our neighbors. However, the idea of the Protestant work ethic comes out of Calvinism, so it is also heavily influenced by ideas of predestination and that certain individuals are chosen and are intrinsically good, while other individuals are not chosen and are thus intrinsically bad. Because of this combination of predestination and valuing of hard works, we end up with a system in which we see affluence or success as a sign of God's favor and internal moral goodness. The Protestant work ethic is also often seen as a positive thing, something that leads people to be good employees, to run good businesses, and to create good communities. While the theology, ideology, and behaviors associated with the Protestant work ethic can be seen in the history of Europe, they are particularly obvious when we look at the history of the United States as a nation that was founded with a government that was shaped by individuals who were influenced by Calvinism and Puritanism. It is obvious how these ideas about our responsibility to our work and our economic activities were written into our ideas of how our governmental systems work. But it is vital to remember that the systems that flourish underneath the Protestant work ethic often also hide systems of oppression, repression, and violence, such as our system of slavery that supported the economic development of the United States. At this point, you might be asking, if our country was founded on ideas of the Protestant work ethic, then what's gone wrong? And I think to answer that question, we have to talk about the prosperity gospel, or the health and wellness gospel. The prosperity gospel is a theological movement or perspective that comes out of charismatic Christianity and movements like the Pentecostalism movement. This theological perspective claims that financial blessing and physical well being are always the will of God, and that financial success or physical health is evidence of God's blessing or favor. Not having that financial success or wellness is a sign that we have not yet done what we need to in order to earn God's blessing. The prosperity gospel first came to prominence through revivals in the 1950s, but began to gain traction and popularity through televangelism in the 1980s. If you watched our video on Christian nationalism, you know that the 1980s televangelists were very active in the movement of the moral majority and the religious right. These are individuals who were interested in religious revival as well as political and social control. The prosperity gospel was also adopted by influential early Pentecostal leaders, where it was spread across the country and around the world. The basic idea behind the prosperity gospel is that if you pray enough and believe hard enough and obey your pastor enough and give enough money, that good things will come to you. This is also the idea that you would give your pastor a seed donation. You give me a little bit of money now, and then later God will give you a return on that investment, and your blessings will be all the greater. Unfortunately, a lot of the pastors who are preaching this prosperity gospel are really just leeching prosperity for themselves out of their congregations and their followers. The prosperity gospel is a reduction of the Protestant work ethic to the space where the idea that success is now a transaction. It is not that I am called by God to do my work well, and doing my work well is rewarded for my effort, but rather I am called to success for success's sake. And I am engaging in a transaction with God in order to get success. Those individuals who are around me who have extreme wealth, extreme opulence, are not individuals who are greedy. They're not individuals who are lacking humility. Rather, they are God's chosen. They are the best amongst us. Their wealth, their status, their power shows that they are good and that we should be listening to them. While claiming to be about God and our theological perspectives, the prosperity gospel is rather a concentration of power and a justification of inequality in the systems around us. While economic inequality is nothing new to the United States, it has been on the rise since the 1980s and has gotten out of control in recent years. We've lost any kind of ideological sense that economic advancement requires some kind of responsibility to the collective or the common good. We've gotten rid of the idea that we are in a society together and we have certain expenses that we must pay for together, and have instead given into impulses of hoarding in which any kind of spending is seen as a negative. We have seen a complete reorientation of our political systems around this very individualistic and isolationist idea of profit at the expense of all else. We've seen a reorientation in our tax structures as the government seeks to eliminate necessary social services in order to offer additional tax cuts to billionaires. We've seen this through the passing of Citizens United and the decision that money is speech and should be allowed to flow freely, even in the case of campaign finances. And we have now seen that our campaign finance system has become a pay for play system where corporations and elite individuals are able to buy influence, control, and favors. We've also seen a privatization of public services. I've seen comments or posts online talking about things like the post office isn't profitable, so it should be shut down, when services like the post office or Medicare were never intended to be profitable. Rather, these are services that are offered to everyone and are collectively paid for through our taxes. We've also seen a dramatic increase in corruption and undue influence as we are seeing individuals be appointed to public positions in ways that give them their own economic kickbacks. We're seeing politicians at every level and every party accepting gifts, all the way up to the level of the president accepting a plane from another country that was not previously considered an ally. We are seeing as foreign governments are buying influence, as people with economic power are buying positions and control in government. We are seeing as greed has destroyed our collective progress. And what do we do? What do we do in the face of this? And the only answer that I have is that we continue to resist and we continue to fight back. We continue to call out our politicians and to demand campaign finance reform. We continue to find ways to shop local and support small businesses and resist the convenience of continuing to support businesses that work against our own interests. We continue to participate in direct action, in protest, and in boycott to make sure that our voices are heard. And we continue to make sure that the people around us know what is going on, know they have a voice, and find opportunities to use it. We've gotten to where we are because honestly, most of us weren't really paying too much attention as these movements have gained footholds in our religious, political, social, and cultural institutions and systems. We didn't really notice as the water was getting warmer, and now we are frogs in a boiling pot where these ideologies that go against our very being have begun to take control. And we haven't done enough to resist them. But the good news is that now is always the perfect time to start. Thank you for being here today and with us through this series where we've dug into some of the stuff that is hard to talk about. I appreciate you looking into those dark corners with me. Next week, we are going to turn our attention towards the light as we talk about the fact that rebellions are built on hope.